You're listening to Blue Jays Nation Radio with Cam Lewis and Tyler Yaremchuk, a member of the Nation network of podcasts.
Episode 132 of Blue Jays Nation Radio. Yaremchuk and Coombsy, the first post-series episode of the pod this season. Felt good to have baseball back, Coombsy. We'll just start with that. It was nice waking up on a Sunday and being like, damn, I got something to do today. The Jays are playing.
It really was. I mean, the outcomes weren't necessarily exactly how we wanted them to go, specifically on the Saturday and the Sunday, but that Thursday was an absolute blast. I mean, I'll even just take, I don't know if I'll be saying this if they have any rough games against the likes of Kansas City or, Anaheim in the coming days, but right now I'll take even a shitty, frustrating Saturday, Sunday loss to the Cardinals over spring training March ball. I'm just happy it's here, to be honest with you.
Today's episode is brought to you by Betano. You can find them at betano.ca, a premium sports betting and online casino experience. Hashtag the game starts now with Betano. Please play responsibly. Must be 19 years or older. And Coombsy, if you had the over in that opening day thriller, then you would have been a happy bettor. Record-setting opening day 19 hits is the first in our 3 up, 3 down segment today. It was nice to see the Jays offense just kind of come alive right off the bat.
It really was. I mean, it had a vibe at the very start. It almost kind of felt like last year's wild card game. A lot of people were pointing that out on Twitter. It was kind of like, oh, the Jays jumped out to an early lead. We were all exciting. And then all of a sudden that lead's just slowly disappearing. Alek Manoah doesn't have his best start. The relievers are blowing the leads. It's like, this looks weirdly familiar. I don't love this, but it was nice to see the bats just be so good. And against good St. Louis pitching, too. I mean, the Jays come out and explode with 19 hits. Literally everybody's involved. You have George Springer at the top of the lineup. Every time he puts the bat on the ball, it lands. It's 5 times, Bo 4 times. Everyone's involved. It's fantastic. I mean, I think we saw on the first day the upside of the lineup. It's a little bit of a different approach than we've seen before. It seems like more hitting for contact, trying to draw walks, trying to get guys on base, trying to, go from first to third on a single, trying to, steal a base here and there. It's a really different look than what we've seen in years past. And I mean, it wasn't necessarily the case in games 2 and 3, but game 1, it was, damn, this is an exciting offense.
Yeah, just zeroing in on game 1, I think, the fact that it was so exciting is obviously a big positive. The second up I'd have from that is just the Jays got contributions from a bunch of different parts in their lineup, right? You had obviously Springer and Bassitt combining for 9 hits, but Chapman hitting in the 7 hole. He racks up 3 hits in that ball game. Kevin Kiermaier is going to be one of my ups as well. 2 hits in the 9 hole. We heard them say on the broadcast a bunch of times that, Kevin Kiermaier has a goal of being the best 9-hole hitter in baseball. And I mean, with that being his goal, it was certainly a good start for him in that opener. I liked what Kevin Kiermaier brought to the Jays lineup. Played some good defense too.
I did too. It was a pretty big game changer there late in game 1 when he ripped from first to third there and kind of set the table for Vladdy to drive him in with the winning sack or the go-ahead sack fly at that time. I mean, if you look at last year's version of the Jays or the ones in the past, if that's a different guy running, not Kevin Kiermaier, probably doesn't wind up at third base and the Jays may not go ahead in that inning. So like I was just touching on, it was the new look aspect of the team, the speed, that kind of thing that we saw a lot on display in game 1.
Yeah, those are the 2 big ups there. Listen, we got a chance to see a lot of Jays relievers in this series, which maybe wasn't ideal with the 3 pitchers they had going. But for the third up, I mean, there's going to be a lot of attention on this bullpen here. And we're kind of at this point, because they dropped 2 of 3, we're reaching for some of the ups. But I did like what I saw from Erik Swanson in that series. I'll give him kind of the third up, Coombs. Yeah, I thought when he came in that first game, struck out 2 batters, pitched an inning for the Jays. I didn't love the decision to actually go away from him at all, but we'll touch on that in a bit. I thought Erik Swanson gave the Jays some really solid outings.
Yeah, I don't blame him at all for the earned runner. I don't even know if they called it an earned run in game 2. That really wasn't his fault at all. I thought, we mentioned this in the preseason podcast with BK as well. Lots of pressure for this guy, man. He's coming into the season as the guy who came back in a big trade for a likable player. Mm-hmm. Microscope's always on relievers. It's never easy. I mean, to come out and pitch well like that, that's a nice way to start your season. Another one we should probably give a +2 here from the bullpen is Romano, considering how ridiculously good that first appearance was in the 9th inning. We're going to touch on this one again, too, when we get to the downs, but I'm a little disappointed they didn't use him in the 8th against St. Louis's big guys. But when he came out against the bottom of St. Louis's order, in the ninth. He was just like ridiculously dominant. And it's nice to see that too, because it's a shitty way they ended last year with pretty much every reliever melting down in that game against Seattle. So specifically for Romano to come out and just kill it like that, that's what you like to see.
Yeah, it was a really good opener from Romano. Let's get into the downs, though, because on the whole, I guess, I mean, you're excited that baseball's back, all that. But losing 2-3 in your season opener is a little disappointing, obviously. So let's talk about maybe a little bit of what went wrong. Number one, Coombsy, it's going to be the appearances from the 3 starting pitchers. Alek Manoah had his first start, I believe, since 2021. I mean, in his young career, something we talked about a lot last year throughout his just ridiculous season was he never really has bad starts. He has average starts and great starts, and like that's it. But he only goes 3 1/3. He gives up 5 earned runs as well. That was an ugly one from Manoah. Certainly not how we were envisioning him starting his season.
No, definitely not. And circling back to what I just said, when you look at his last start, was maybe didn't handle the pressure of the wild card game one particularly well, and had a bit of a hard time in that outing, a difficult first inning. You know, it's not necessarily the best to see him come out on opening day and not pitch his best. At this time of year, usually the batters are further ahead than the pitchers, and he did say after the game, it's just going to take a couple of adjustments and everything should be fine. But I mean, I'll give the guy the benefit of the doubt. Like you said, since he came up in 2021, it's been quality start after quality start after quality start. But I mean, I think it kind of just goes to show this was 3 1/3 inning and 5 earned runs. And that's something that didn't happen once for him last season. Went at least 5 innings in every start last year. And his most amount of earned runs in a single start was just 4. So, I mean, like somebody with that much consistency, I'm not going to sit here and put really any stock into a start it wasn't even April. It was at the end of March. So not too much of a worry for me.
Yeah, and that's where that's where I'd go with Gausman too. Like for both Manoah and Gausman, I was like, listen, not ideal. Gausman still managed to go 6 innings. He still struck out 7, but there was those squeakers, right? And you feel like you're getting PTSD to Gausman starts from last year, where it's like, oh my God, he deserves way better than this. But at the end of the day, no earned runs from Kevin Gausman, so definitely not fair to classify that as a quote unquote poor start, even though the Jays lost that ball game. For Manoah and Gausman, I'm not concerned at all, but I will say, I don't have that same feeling about Chris Bassitt. Granted, we haven't had, the night to sleep on it. You wake up the next morning and go, it's just one start, not that bad. But they hammered Chris Bassitt.
Oh, yeah.
And they didn't just get a couple of lucky shots in on him. No. It was early. It was often. It was home runs. It was hard base hits. I looked at that, and then you hear everything the broadcast is talking about, how, he might be a little rattled having to call his own game. There's a lot going on in his head. And I'm just like, holy shit, this might be a headache all year.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm not worried about the first 2 starters at all. Gausman, bad luck. Manoah, like I said, whatever. Early start in the season, nothing in the world. But Bassitt, though, you talk about him using the PitchCom, and he's trying to throw like 10 different pitches to a new catcher. I think given how bad that was, it wasn't just sort of bad. It wasn't just like, oh yeah, he allowed a huge bomb in the middle of the game. No, it was like almost every at bat was just St. Louis was teeing off on him. So probably after how bad that was, it might already be time to just step back and be like, okay, we got to do something different. Let Danny Jansen or Alejandro Kirk or whoever is catching just call the game. Maybe you can't use 9 different pitches. Let's shrink it down to 4 or 5, maybe even 3 if we have to. It's going to take some time to learn the catchers, for the pitcher to learn, for them both to learn each other. It might not be ideal when you're making your first real starts with the pitch clock, to be fucking around with the PitchCom trying to call your own game. There's too many things going on. Do the Mark Burley style thing where you just let your catcher tell you what pitch they want and don't shake them off. Just go for it. And I would venture that's going to work better than whatever the fuck was going on today, because whatever was happening on Sunday, do not try that again. That was hard to watch. That was batting practice.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it. Why are we trying to win the World Series, win the Cy Young in your first start? I get that one of the things that makes Chris Bassitt who he is and as effective as he's been for the last number of years is, hey man, he's got a bunch of pitches, the batter doesn't know what's coming. But first start against St. Louis, maybe you didn't need 8 or 9. Maybe you just needed 4 good pitches. And you're right. Why are you trying to galaxy brain yourself in your first start? It was it was really weird. So Chris Bassitt gets one of the downs. The second down outside of the rotation, I'm going to go and throw one your way, Coombsy. I didn't like the way John Schneider managed his bullpen in that first game. Talking about galaxy braining, I felt like that's exactly what was going on. It's early in the year. You had a guy in Zach Pop who was throwing really well. Okay, you take him out because you don't like the matchup or whatever. You bring in Eric Swanson. He's pitching lights out. And then again, you kind of just galaxy brain yourself. I felt like early in the year, opening day, even this whole first week here, if you got a guy pitching well, just let him go. Don't sweat the matchups right now. Just let guys get into grooves a little bit. And I felt like Schneider, again, was over-managing a little bit and made some bad calls in that first game.
Yeah, I think there was some calls throughout both the first two games too, really. I mean, even in the second game, this one probably doesn't stand out quite as much, but there was an opportunity with Kevin Biggio batting, and I think the bases were loaded. This must have been the 8th inning, and the game's still well within reach, and Kevin Biggio is allowed to take the at bat when you have someone like Kirk sitting on the bench who could come in and hit instead. And it was kind of like, wait a minute, why would you have Kevin Biggio taking a late game situation, a late game at bat like this when you have options on the bench? And then, like you said, circling back to the first game, Zach Pop's killing it, comes out probably way too quickly. Eric Swanson, he gets taken out, even though he might actually be their best lefty specialist pitcher. We heard BK talk about that on our preseason podcast. He had ridiculously good splits last year against lefties. And I mean, it's the magnifying glass is on this exact thing so hard right now, because I think a lot of people didn't love the way that John Schneider managed in the second wildcard game when they imploded. I mean, obviously a lot of that is just the hindsight 2020, because every single thing went wrong in that game. And that's just kind of the easy way to do it. Like, let's, second guess all of these decisions, but it was a lot of the same decisions in game one. Like it feels like he's leaning too hard on Tim Meza to be this lefty specialist outs guy. And I'm not really sure if he is that guy. Like the way Eric Swanson was pitching, I would have rather had him go up against those big St. Louis left-handed batters. And, the bullpen wound up blowing like 3 different leads in that game. You also have the 8th inning. St. Louis's best guys are all coming up, and it's a perfect non-save situation for Jordan Romano, kind of the new school way of doing it. But instead, somebody else comes in, Jimmy Garcia comes in, allows 2 runs, and then Romano doesn't go into the 9th inning. And, it's still a save situation, but it's against the bottom of their lineup.
Yeah.
It probably would have made more sense for Romano to come in and face the Goldschmidts, the Arenados, those guys, rather than having him go in the 9th inning just because it's the 9th inning. This is just kind of, it's that old school managing. It has its positives, but it's also frustrating to see the bullpen work in that way. But we'll see how things go as time moves along.
Yeah, like I'm not going to sit here and rag too hard on anyone really for their opening weekend performances. Like, again, it is just 3 out of 162. And I think, every game is tough. I'm not saying there are not must win, but, free spots on the bingo card here for the Jays. But the nice part about their opponents early in the season here is, like, you're going KC next for 4. They're not going to be a very competitive ball club this year. LA, I mean,
bad, man. They look bad.
Yeah. LA, you never know what you're going to get because it's Trout and Ohtani, but like they are probably not going to be that much of a threat. You go Detroit after that. They got absolutely rinsed by the Tampa Bay Rays today. Like your next 10 games. Pardon?
They almost got no hit in that game.
Yeah, like
I stopped paying attention, but
Springs was pitching for the Rays. He had like 12 Ks. Like it was just ridiculous. He was running through that whole lineup. He didn't give up a hit for I think 6 innings. You have some weak spots coming up here where you can maybe experiment a little, but they do have a great chance here in the first 2 weeks of the season to really get off on the right foot. So losing 2-3 to the Cardinals, I'm not like losing my mind over it. No one should be. Even if they got swept this weekend, we shouldn't have been like losing our shit, because again, easy spots coming up here, some series you can definitely take advantage of, and you can really still, even though you lost 2 or 3 to start, get off to a good start when you look back at the first few weeks of the season as a whole. So yeah, we got the weird decisions from Schneider, the pitching and the 3 starters specifically, and the third down we'll go with no home runs, Coombsy. I mean, this offense last year, I would have been like, my mind would have been blown. They still, got 10 in that first game, but the offense kind of really dried up from that that point forward. Any concerns there? Like, I don't know. I look at that first game and I go, hey, you scored 10 runs. You didn't have to hit a dinger. Like, that's a sign of a team that can generate offense really well. And maybe it's, at least in the moment, I was like, this is a team that's going to sustainably or consistently put up good numbers because they're not just relying on the long ball. But I still would have liked to see a dinger.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too. I think if this was a random series in mid-June or July or something, and they went ahead and, had the 10-run game where they get 19 hits and they score all those runs without hitting a bomb, we'd be like, wow, that's cool. This is a diversified lineup that's doing its thing. Like I said, pretty much right off the hop in the show, like, look at them going first to third, using their speed, like drawing walks, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, it's weird to see this is I think Scott Carson pointed this out on the broadcast, and it was also on Twitter as well. But this was the first time that the Jays have ever gone without hitting a home run in their first 3 games of the season. And I think the only other team that hasn't hit a home run thus far is the Milwaukee Brewers, who have a lineup full of guys who you're like, who even is that? This guy can't hit for any sort of power whatsoever. They were among the worst hitting teams in Major League Baseball last year. So that's not necessarily ideal. I think we all know that they're going to hit for a little bit less power this season, but it's not exactly something you'd like to see. I really thought that Matt Chapman won. It was in like the 3rd or 4th inning. I think it would have put them ahead 5-4, 6-4, or something like that when the game was still tight. In game 3, I thought that was gone. And then the St. Louis outfielder caught it, and it was absolutely devastating. And the kind of weird thing is now so they're off to Kansas City, a huge park where it's hard to hit home runs. How long is this going to go on? When are they going to hit their first bomb?
It is a tough park to hit homers, but I got a funny feeling that it'll be early in this first game against KC. Someone will just get one from Brady Singer and take it for a ride. They're due. They're the definition of due. There's no way you can roll out Springer, Bo, and Vladdy as the top 3 of your order for like a 4th, 5th, or 6th straight game potentially and not have one of those guys stumble into hitting a bomb. It'll happen. It'll come. I'm not that worried about it at all.
No. The positive to draw here too is like the approach did look really good. They really should have scored a whole bunch of runs in game 2. They probably should have scored more runs in game 3. I think the process and the foundations there, like they drew Vladdy walked 3 times, Biggio walked twice, Merrifield twice, even Varsho walked twice. He was hitting off of lefties, and then there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more. So like, they walked more than 10 times in that series. Like the approach was good. So I mean, the process is there. It'll come around.
Not a lot of reasons to be like legitimately concerned about this Jays team. I mean, if they stumble against Kansas City, then maybe we start having some different conversations when we do this podcast Thursday evening. But like, it's so early. I mean, I saw some people on Twitter like doing the usual thing. Some people calling for Schneider's head after game 1. It's same old shit from the playoffs, and it's like, good Lord, people, it's gonna be a long summer if that's the case.
Yeah, just maybe tune out and save yourself the difficulties if you're in the beginning of April melting down about managerial decisions or signing for Bassitt after his first start. Like this, let's wait until July, August to freak out about things.
Although, and this was, so when we did our predictions episode with BK, we also did the 3 things at the end that we wanted to see for the vibes of the season. And one of mine was Bo Bichette figures out defense, and we're done having the conversation about him as a shortstopper. Oh, do they got to move him to second base? Blah, blah, blah. And his first fucking play of the year, he rifled it into the stands. And I was just like, are you kidding me, man? You couldn't give me like the first series to at least be like, hey, I might be right about this one. Could not have been more incorrect. He had another play in that game where Vladdy had to come off the bag and tag the guy to get him out. Like, oh man, that conversation's not dying.
Yeah, they did a masterful job of improving the outfield defense, and I think we saw that, especially in game 1. There was hits and runs being saved, but unfortunately, the improved outfield defense does not mean that the infield defense is going to be any better, specifically at one spot. And I mean, we're not going to. I don't know. Where are we with this one? This is a weird one. Like this is something that's been a talking point literally forever. So it's not early, and we're not overreacting to something early if it's been something we've talked about since day one. But I mean, what's the solution here? Is there any situation where we see him being moved to second? I personally doubt it. I don't think it's going to happen. It is what it is at this point. I think there's enough strong defense elsewhere in the diamond that to compensate for it, that it's not the end of the world. It's just so noticeable. Mm-hmm. Like it's so present.
And it's again, because we've all latched onto it. Like Matt Chapman made a bad play as well in that game, in game 2, and in a way you could say it cost them that ball game because it led to basically 3 runs. And we're not talking about that because Matt Chapman's got gold gloves and he's one of the best third basemen in the league. I'm not like I know it's a bit of an apple to oranges comparison, but like when Bo messes up, everyone's noticing it, right? Everyone's talking about it. It's just become one of those things, unfortunately, which is why I said for the vibes of the season, I didn't want it to be a thing, but here we are. It will most certainly be a thing. The Jays dropped 2 of 3 to the St. Louis Cardinals. They have 4 coming up against the Kansas City Royals. We're going to talk about that and more, but first, a quick break. BGN Radio episode 132 brought to you by Botano. Okay, before we stepped aside there, Coombsy, I said my Bichette one's already not looking good. I have another prediction from our opener that is not looking good as well. I said Aaron Judge would take a step back. Yeah, that guy's not taking a step back.
No,
he's
good.
I think
we both kind of put that into our predictions. It's almost as though we were just like manifesting it into the universe. I don't think either of us actually believed that was going to be the case. I just kind of hoped they were going to let him stop hitting the juice balls. But it seems that they are letting him hit the juice balls again, which is not good. Hopefully the Jays get some juice balls in Kansas City, though. That'd be ideal.
Yeah, that would be nice. Just like the first pitch he sees, he hammers it to center field. And I was driving in listening to the game. I was driving into our office listening to the game, and it was just like, yeah, fucking, of course he just did that. Of course Aaron Judge did that. Elsewhere around the majors, let's talk about this. The game times down almost half an hour in terms of the average. Again, very early, but Dan Schulman pointed this out on the broadcast that at the start of today, the first few days of the regular season had gone by, and the average game was 2 hours and 40 minutes. Listen, I know some people are not happy about the pitch clock. I know some people think it's rushing the game and changing the way it's played too much. I don't hold that view at all. If games hold under 3 hours all season, this change is a massive victory for Major League Baseball.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I didn't love it at first. I was a bit skeptical. I thought that it would create a little bit more chaos, but all it's really done thus far is just, I mean, you can still have like a classic long game. Like I think that 10-9 game in game 1 between the Jays and the Cardinals was a classic game. It was, 3 hours, 36 minutes, still like a long, interesting thing. It's just that the time between things happening is shorter now, which is probably better. I mean, I do still love that, late season / playoff drama where there's, 30, 45 seconds, a minute even between each pitch. And I don't know. I feel like maybe that'll be lost in certain times and it's a bit disappointing, but just clicking around the channels and watching games, things are moving a lot quicker and it's, I hate to say it, a lot less boring because I'm not like a baseball is boring guy, but there are times where you're like, oh man, like I'm watching San Diego and Colorado in the 5th inning and it's taking a minute and a half between pitches. What are we doing? But it's good to lose that. I just hope we don't lose those cool drawn out ninth inning moments. I hope that's not what disappears.
Yeah, and that's actually the one thing I wish Major League Baseball would have tweaked with this is get rid of it in the 9th inning or extras. I think, you don't want a game. Like, can you imagine a 3-1 count, bases loaded, and we're robbed of the final moment of that game, a potential walk-off hit because a pitcher took a second too long? Like, I can just see that happening once this year, and it'll be a major story. It'll go viral. ESPN will be posting all that stuff, and it'll make the sport look bad. I think the easy tweak would have been 9th inning, no pitch clock. Yeah. What would that extend games by? 3 minutes, maybe at most?
And those are the fun parts of games that everybody wants. That everybody wants to be watching anyway, right? So.
Yeah, no one's ever said the 9th inning in a close ball game wasn't exciting, right? Like, I mean, come on.
It's too long.
We'll see. I did notice, I think former J. Marcus Stroman was the first pitcher to get dinged with a pitch clock violation. So he will be the answer to that trivia question. I think he did it on purpose because he wanted to be the answer to the trivia question.
I think that he blocked the pitch clock on Twitter after the game.
That's good. Any other takeaways from you from opening weekend around Major League Baseball? I mean, there was like a few interesting games I tuned into. The Red Sox and Orioles series was high scoring. That was fun. It was 9-5 today. Adam Duvall had like a huge bomb. It was a fun weekend. I'll say that.
It was also kind of a random thing to point out because it doesn't really pertain to us whatsoever. Is the Cardinals looked fantastic. I didn't realize their lineup was that good. It's just a team I truly just don't pay too much attention to. And I thought that it was Goldschmidt, Arenado in the middle of the lineup, and then this new Lars Nootbaar guy. And I thought, there ain't a hell of a lot otherwise there, but man, they just had 9 guys who can hit. And it's like the 2015 Jays style lineup, just absolutely mashing. I didn't expect that.
Yeah, they got some legit bats there. I will make a prediction for the Cardinals just based on listening to the broadcast this weekend and getting a kind of feel for that team. Dylan Carlson for a starting pitcher. I mean, that's probably they need an arm. They don't really have a high-end ace because, Adam Wainwright already on the IL. He's old, obviously, in baseball terms. I think they could use an arm, and Carlson feels like, weirdly, he's a spare part for that organization.
Yeah, they have so many different bats and so many different good outfielders. This is like circling all the way back to like our off-season talk. Their bullpen too is a little bit sketchy. It's like Jordan Hicks could not throw a strike. The Jays were walking off of him like crazy. So that's a team where it does kind of remind me 2015 Jays energy, man. They need some pitching help, but damn, their lineup's ridiculous.
Yeah. Before we take a look ahead at the series against Kansas City, Keegan Matheson has this. It's a quote from Chris Bassitt. He says, "I'm at a little bit of a loss for words. I've never had a game like this where 6 different pitches were getting hit hard." He said the Cardinals were way more aggressive than normal, commended their lineup as well. Just kind of hearing that where he, talks about 6 of his pitches getting hit hard, and then also he points out the Cardinals were more aggressive than normal. It felt like he didn't even really have maybe the right mindset coming into this. Like, you should be prepared for the other team to swing early. Like, it felt like he was throwing batting practice today. And I think that quote kind of raises an eyebrow. And I'm like, were you fully prepared heading into this one here? Because it just seems like this start was wildly disorganized on a lot of fronts.
Yeah, definitely. That validates kind of exactly what we were saying earlier. Whatever you guys did before this game to prepare and how you were planning to execute it, don't do that next game. Try something different because that was bad.
Mm-hmm. 4 coming up against Kansas City this week. It is Barrios versus Brady Singer to start the series on Monday. Okay. Listen, if there is any team for Jose Barrios to start his season on a strong note against, this is a great matchup.
It is. I was thinking that as Chris Bassitt is getting launched around in the 3rd and 4th innings, I'm thinking, well, this is probably going to be a taxing bullpen day, but at the very least, Jose Barrios is pitching the next game, and then Yusei Kikuchi's pitching after that. So we've got some big-time wild cards coming up here. We really don't know what to expect. 2 guys where you're like, are you going to be as bad as last year? Are you going to be as good as you have been in your career? What are you going to be? Honestly, who knows? But like you said, this is the Kansas City Royals. They scored in their opening 3 games against the Minnesota Twins, 3 runs, 4 runs in total? Their lineup looks decrepit, and it's going to be at Kauffman Stadium in Kansas City, which is a cave. It's a difficult hitter's park. It's a pitcher's park. So, if there was a place for both of them, really, Barrios and Kikuchi, to get things going in the right direction, you were right. It is Kansas City, though. Kansas City is so cursed. I will never go into a series against the Royals in Kansas City as a Blue Jays fan and think good things are going to happen. I can't do it.
And then after the first 2 games, both rotations reset. So it's Manoah versus Greinke, Kevin Gausman against Jordan Lyles. In the Zach Greinke start, he was actually decent, 5 1/3, gave up 2 earned runs. They lost that game 2-0. Jordan Lyles in his start was actually decent, Coombsy, 5 1/3, gave up 1 earned run, and they lost the game 2-0. So Greinke and Lyles got off to okay starts. Fuck, those bats are so bad.
Yeah, who's in the Kansas City lineup? It's Bobby Witt Jr.'s their big rookie sophomore type guy. Is there anybody else there?
Salvador Perez. I think Pasquantino has like a little bit of upside this year. I just know that because I drafted him in one of my fantasy leagues because I read him in an article. It was like, hey, here's a potential high upside bat. So yeah, like a couple of, I guess, okay bats, but outside of that, not a lot going on. Whit Merrifield revenge series as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. I kind of forgot about that. Whit Merrifield was there. It'll be his return to Kansas City, I would assume. I don't think they played the Royals late in the season last year, but they are an easy team to forget, so it's hard to say. Yeah, let's just hope that it's a whole bunch of runs and good pitching performances, and the Jays play the Royals like they should. Win 3 of 4 games at least. Could possibly sweep. Why not? The Royals suck. They scored 3 runs against the Twins, and the Twins are not a spectacular pitching team. So this is a lineup that doesn't hit. And I really hope I'm not jinxing something here though, because we know Kansas City, it's bad vibes, but I think I'm feeling pretty good. I think I am.
Our friends at Betano have the Blue Jays as minus 133 favorites for the series opener, 7:40 Eastern first pitch on Monday evening. The Jays also plus 118 on the run line for that ball game. Actually, not as big of favorites as I thought they would be. Maybe that's a little bit of the Jose Barrios effect and them not expecting a lot of people back in the Jays with that. But I'm hoping Barrios gets off to a good start. That's one of the big things I'm watching in this game. I would love to see the bats come through with a couple of dingers just because, the long ball is more fun. But yeah, lots of offense, hopefully some good pitching. And Coombsy, I like our chances of coming out of this with 3 wins to talk about on Thursday. And it could, hopefully the Jays take advantage of this because... Again, I know I'm always so torn on this. Like, yeah, there's 3 games through 162. It's a lot. But then I also go, you got like 10 weakish spots on the schedule in a row here. These wins are worth just as much as wins in September,
Yeah, we saw last year, man. The Yankees had the American League East wrapped up in like mid-May.
Yeah.
So you get off to a ridiculously good start and you make your life a lot easier down the road. Like, I'm not going to sit here and worry too much about results, but you can also sit here and be like, a fantastic start is a fantastic start, and you can definitely wish for it because they have the schedule here. The Cardinals were the hard part of the easy schedule, and they still got out of it with 1-2. Not a horrible result, and now it's like 4 versus Kansas City, 3 versus Anaheim, and then it's home against Detroit. Detroit sucks. Like that's 10 games right there against teams that maybe Anaheim's in the mix for the playoffs. The other 2 sure as hell won't be. So why not go ahead and win 8 of 10 games here? Seems doable.
Why not? 8-2 run. Jays would start the season at a nice 9-3. That feels about right. Let's hope they live up to that hype. All right, there you go. That is episode 132. If you're new to the pod, we drop a new episode after every single Jays series throughout the season. So make sure you subscribe. Leave us a review if you're on Apple as well. Give us 5 stars if you've been enjoying or listening to all 132 of them. Coombsy, you enjoy this week, and we will be back on Thursday with a fresh pod.
Best wishes.
Thanks for tuning in to Blue Jays Nation Radio. Don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from to never miss an episode.